Lately, it seems every passing second brings news of another climate-driven disaster. But we still have the power to turn back the clock. Harnessing the power of collective human energy, today's university students are working together to chart a new future, demanding and creating the solutions for a sustainable climate. Our focus in science, engineering, activism, and politics offers the potential of a better tomorrow for all of us. Tune in to Campus Climate Corps for news of what is and what is not happening at this year's UN Climate Conference. Prepare for a livable tomorrow with a life and career of action. Join us and become part of the solution.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to Campus Climate Corps' Conference Day 2 COP27 briefing. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. We really do have a special guest that we're going to be welcoming on the program today. Returning, of course, we have Dr. John Capiz and Esteban Rodofili, currently in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, as we speak. Also joining us today will be Val Holly-Frank. I really want to make sure that everybody knows there is a live Campus Climate Corps volunteer monitoring all of the chats. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit those at any point, and our volunteer will ensure that your question gets heard. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Esteban. Esteban, what's going on in Egypt right now? And maybe tell us a bit about our special guest. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Finally, the conference has started. Today, essentially, it was a registration day, but tomorrow, the thick of the activity with the big shots will tune more on and on from the conference. But today, to begin, we have a special guest. We have Dr. Borzikansky from the University of Florida. His background is in genetics. He holds a PhD from the University of Cambridge. And as of now, his career has shifted towards natural resource management. And at the School of Natural Resources and Environment, his class is Natural Resource Management and Innovation Systems. So without further ado, Dr. Borzikansky, take it away.
You're also muted, Dr. Borzikansky.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having me. I will try to be very concise and try to imagine a few streams of thought that I think are important. I will concentrate my my little talk on three groups of subjects. The first one has to deal with what are in my view, the four main streams of action and thought and research that we should be emphasizing. And these four, in my view, have to take into account the following things. One, first of all, I think we have to recognize that this is going to imply the whole movement towards climate change mitigation will imply economic sacrifices and economic challenges. Without recognizing that, we may not be able to move forward. So that's the first one. The second one is disaster risk reduction. I think this is something that we need to incorporate as well. This may be somewhat of a gloomy prospect, but disasters are happening. and they will probably continue to happen. So it is imperative that we focalize on the reduction of these risks. The third point about these four streams that I think should be taken into account is what I call social cohesion. And I talk about social cohesion in the face of what I said before, in the face of economic insecurity, in the face of disasters. That is that these are going to affect society at large. They are going to affect societies in many ways, in different ways, and in different places, with different kinds of urgencies. And lastly, from this first module that I wanted to express is environmental stewardship. We must not forget that even though we have an economic pathway that we have to take care of, we have disaster risk management, and we have to take care of social cohesion, the crucial aspect is to keep the globe, the planet, as a place where we can live, as a place where we can live in the most possible harmony that we can find. So these are I think, the four main streams of thought that I think are that should probably guide us in referring to the problem as a whole. So I will now try to go to my second stream, which is mostly about adaptive management. So I will now, in my second, if you wish, my second pillar of the talk, concentrates on what I would call anticipatory adaptation activities. And this is easily said and easily classified, but let's try to imagine that we have three big streams in regard to adaptation. There is, first of all, social adaptation. By social adaptation, I mean everything that has to do with the information we exchange, and also educational postures, in the sense that what we relate to each other is something that has to do, regarding climate change, with the search for solutions. And this search for solutions is, to a large extent, has to be seen as something that takes place among us people. And I think that's I think this has to stand out in terms of the information we exchange and the educational opportunities that we have. The second pillar of the anticipatory adaptation activity is institutional. And the institutional pillar is extremely important, because this refers not to social adaptation, but to the institutional policies that are put in place by societies once they reach a level of agreement. So this has to do with normative stuff. This has to do with legal stuff. This has to do with what we can do, we're allowed to do, and we should be able to do in order to mitigate risks and climate change effects. So the institutional aspect of it is crucial in the sense that it has aspects of delivery of policy, aspects of implementation of policy, And how could we not mention governance? How could we not mention the fact that in order to have the deliveries of policies, we need governance, which is a subject that is probably escapes our talk this morning. But in any case, we had social adaptive activities and institutional. And last but not least, there is a third pillar here, which is the physical and the structural aspects of it. In other words, what can we do technology-wise, as we have seen through the last decade? The application of solar, the application of hydrogen, the application of wind, the application of technological solutions. And this is where the innovation part comes in. I believe that we do live in a world where this is a big piece of the current economic system, the way things work in society, the way the economic and the social system work. And innovation is part and parcel of that system. And we are looking at years of, I think, productive research in carbon sequestration, productive research in all kinds of solutions that need to be implemented physically. In other words, these are not governance, they are too, but these are not mostly governance related. They are research related, innovation related, driven by science and driven by technological applications. In that sense, we can allow our imagination to flow and to think of a world where CO2 levels maybe start to go down, or we may stabilize them in some way. And I think that should be our aim in terms of decarbonization, in terms of trying to find and support all the science possible that is giving us solutions or may give us solutions, physical infrastructure solutions that will end in diminishing risk and so on. So now I come finally to my my third stream of points, and they may be re-emphasizing a few of the ones that I already mentioned. These are 5 points. I think the first one is we need to calculate vulnerabilities. In other words, we need to have a map, if preferably a real-time map, an observatory of where the vulnerabilities are, where can they lead to the risk and disasters that we have been mentioning. And this involves real calculations about how societies are ready or not ready to cope with whatever comes. So there are measures of risk, there are measures of adaptation, there are measures of how readiness, preparedness, and so on, different societies face. And this will constitute our vulnerability domain, if you wish. So the vulnerability domain, in my view, is data-driven. This is not something that lends itself, or which should not lend itself to the opinion whether Nigeria is in worse shape than Nicaragua or so on. No, this has to be data-driven. We need to have indices and indicators of vulnerability in order to compare and in order to effectively be able to challenge them and face them with urgency. The second of the five, and I think I come back here to the institutional landscape, but it has to do with a term that I have not mentioned yet, and it's a term called trust. And I think this is important in the sense of both social activity adaptation and institutional adaptation. And the idea is this. If we cannot trust leaders, there will be no action. So it is imperative that we do trust and find that trust. So in that sense, I have seen some literature saying, written that knowledge and experience in the face of uncertainty is a weak drive to trust and adaptation, while efficacy, perceived efficacy, is a good one, is a strong indicator of trust in the adaptation policies. So what I'm driving at is that within the realm of social anticipatory adaptation activities, we should lay some emphasis upon these questions of trust in leadership and so on, and find and be honest and be speaking about these things in terms of how the institutional landscape can effectively change. Number three, I call it power mapping. And power mapping has to do with what it says, which means where does power lie? Because if we don't realize, if we don't investigate, if we don't understand where power lies, then we will be unable to deliver any kind of transparency, any kind of dialogue, any kind of cross-sector communication. So the power mapping actually refers to the dialogue, which is crucial for governance and the other aspects. One of the other things, the fourth one before we continue, is what I call the policy cycle. This related, of course, to all of the above. I think we should recognize that there is a policy cycle that moves. It moves from the beginning where we have a meeting of stakeholders, and eventually it reaches a point after long periods or short periods of sedimentation, it reaches a point of delivery. So we do have some measure at the beginning of chaotic brainstorming policy alternatives, which end up, in the best of cases, having some real guidance and real delivery and the basic question of implementation. I will now go to my fifth, which is like a little 5-word poem, which are the strategies. And I think these are concrete. I come finally to my final word. And these are things like, and I came up with words like, in the face of climate change. Resist is one. Avoid is another one. Retreat is another one. Advance may be another one. And accommodate may be another one. So these are, you can see that my emphasis here is on how to visualize very punctual, concrete strategies that may be apparently contradictory because you can advance or retreat, but they are dependent upon actual factors on the ground. In other words, these strategies, for example, when I say resist, we are talking levees, we are talking dams, we are talking building walls for the ocean not to invade. When we're talking about accommodate, we are talking about looking at reservoirs, looking at things like drought, things like floods. How do we accommodate? What kinds of issues can we implement in order to do that? So I will now finish with this kind of overview of strategies. I deliberately pointed at resist and avoidance and retreat and advance and accommodate, because I think we have to be extremely flexible. In many cases, we do not know. We cannot predict what will happen here, at what time, in what scale. Therefore, my advice, my message, my takeaway message is, in the end, one of being careful of all the anticipatory adaptive action that I mentioned, but mostly about how do we best implement strategies that are that must be to our advantage, that may be apparently contradictory, but that need to be implemented as fits every and each place where vulnerabilities are identified. Thank you very much.
Dr. Borshikansky, I think that was a really good presentation. I have a couple questions, one from the audience and one from myself, actually, and then I'll pass it over if anyone else in the Zoom call have questions for Dr. Borshikansky too.
Thank you.
My first question is essentially on how do you resolve two conflicting approaches, from your opinion, right? We have two maybe equal approaches on solving a problem, right? How do you resolve those two essentially? How do you propose solving, or how do you propose attempting to solve an issue when there are two proposed responses to that issue, and with respect to climate change?
I don't think there is set out written in stone formula. I think the IPCC, let's go to the origins of where the data and the thing is. I think the IPCC is a good example of what in general is happening and needs to be done and needs to continue to be done. And that is a massive dialogue, data-driven, with lots of stakeholders who are experts and who update constantly our view and our predicament. And I think the only thing I would I can think of is it's not always that we have two. We may have more than two. But in the end, I think the science, we must double down on the science, double down on the predictive capacity of adaptations, and by doubling down, I believe that the data, the science, will become the norm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, thank you. Anyone else on the Zoom call have other questions for Dr. Borshikansky?
I have a question.
Yes.
I noticed that you co-authored a paper with Mark Brown on adaptive management, and Mark basically continued on the program of H.T. Odom which establishes an entire framework for looking at these sort of issues. I'm wondering how the HT Odum approach, the Emergy, the systems ecology approach informs your perspectives on this climate crisis.
I think to a large extent it does. What the Odum Center here at the University of Florida, Phelps Lab, and the Emergy with an M idea is I would like to say that it is a very dear idea to us. Why is it a very dear, it's close idea to us? Because it attempts to put into one currency the environment. In other words, what we are trying to do with the Emergy framework is to derive from solar energy, which is what we are having, is to have one currency for each and every phenomena that we can think of. We can think of agriculture, we can think of energy generation, we can think of water management, and these kinds of issues can be analyzed through an Emergy framework. Once we analyze these through the Emergy framework, what we achieve is a measure of comparative efficacy or comparative environmental damage even. So it evens out every single thing in terms of its actual solar content, so to speak. So we are able to compare in the units that Emergy uses, we are able to compare different systems and see which one is best for us to apply.
As a follow-up on that, given the critical importance and centrality of this concept to the overall climate crisis and our assessment and our solutions, why do you think that, from my perspective, it appears that the University of Florida hasn't really invested in that program and developing that capacity when it's of global significance, and University of Florida has a unique role to play and contribution to make to the world on this issue?
I would say that all is not lost. It may be, it may take some time. I think there will be opportunities to reflect upon this. Interestingly, this framework has been highly considered in Brazil, in Italy, in China, and I think this is an interesting take. I think in general, my short answer would be that the University of Florida, in terms of its campus outlook, its infrastructure outlook, its governance outlook, its so on, is a relatively conservative institution. It's very difficult to change things, especially regarding the framework we have been talking about, which is a complicated framework and relatively difficult to apply. Does that make sense?
I believe it does. I think I joined Dr. Capece in wishing that the University of Florida were to invest more in building up the Emergy program, given its implications for solving the climate crisis.
Yes.
If there are any last questions for Dr. Porziokanski from our Zoom audience, if not, Dr. Porziokanski, thank you so much for your time, your presentation. I can say I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure I speak for the rest of those on the Zoom call and those watching on YouTube.
Thank you
very
so
much for your time.
I wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. Okay, now we'll move into Dr. Capece. I believe you have some content that you have and research that you have done about some of the things happening at COP27, right?
Well, I thought I'd provide sort of an overview of what's coming at COP27. As you know, the event is divided up into a couple of primary zones. You have the blue zone and the green zone. The green zone is public access, provides a lot of exhibits on technologies and other aspects of the climate crisis. Then we have the blue zone, and the blue zone is where it requires special permissions, special badges to gain access. And there are basically three sets of activities going on in the blue zone. You have the official sessions and negotiations of the national and institutional delegates to the UNFCCC and COP27. And then you have the side events, and the side events are often technical content, conversational constituencies, sort of falling between sort of the more public aspects and the UN elements. And then we have the pavilions, and the pavilions are expansive. Last year there were approximately 97 pavilions. This year I count 116, and I thought I would sort of review with people what the pavilions are, how they're made up this year, how they fall into various categories. So I downloaded from the COP27 app the list of about 82 pavilions that had both websites and email contacts. So we'll be posting those on our Facebook and other locations so that viewers can access these and see what discussions are happening at these various pavilions. But I thought I would go over how they're broken down. And let me share with you first a table. Can we see this? So there are 45 national pavilions. 45 nations have set up a pavilion at COP27. And then there are 10 regional pavilions, groups of nations coming together to have an exhibit. Then there are 7 pavilions dedicated to various UN agencies. Then there are 5 that are constituency, people-based, different groups of people and the climate issues from the perspective of these groups. Then the second largest group next to the nations are the technical pavilions. And these are largely NGOs, but some other groups, and they focus on specific subtopics within the climate crisis. Then there are other nonprofits, foundations. There are 4 of those with pavilions. Then interestingly, this year, there are 4 legal pavilions, and I think it will be very interesting to explore the content that they will be offering. And then lastly, there are 11 finance and business pavilions, some of which are your large finance institutions like the World Bank, and then some are multinational corporations that have chosen to establish a pavilion. And I'd like to go over the nations, the 45 nations, and then the 10 regional pavilions. Now, in yellow, you'll see nations highlighted which have their own pavilion. So the United States, Brazil, Denmark, Spain, India, all these nations have set up their own individual pavilion. Other nations have tossed in to host regional pavilions, most notably Norway. Norway is the organizer for the Nordic Pavilion. So whereas it could easily be a national pavilion, they've joined with other Scandinavian nations to have the Nordic Pavilion, and it includes some of the best content that you'll find at one of these COP events. The Eastern European nations that you see along here are involved indirectly through the EU, the European Union Pavilion. And then a number of African nations have their own pavilion, even though these are relatively destitute nations like Niger, for example, and Chad, but they've cobbled together the funds and the resources to host their own pavilion. So it'd be interesting to see what they have to offer. And then Democratic Republic of Congo and Republic of Congo, South Africa, there's several nations. India is back. Last year, India did not have a pavilion, but this year they do. Also, very interestingly, 2 years ago, we lost China. 2 years ago, we had, or two COPs ago, 2019, we had an excellent pavilion by China. They delivered a lot of diverse content, but to a large extent, a lot of nuclear energy content. And last year, there was a Russian pavilion, and it too addressed extensively nuclear energy, but there is no Russian pavilion. So as you can see from this map, there's an entire region of Eurasia that is not represented in the pavilions at COP27. That's significant. And if we continue to lose nations, then it could have a detrimental effect on the ability of the UNFCCC to make progress on this. In fact, the United States was gone from COP up until a couple of years ago. Under the Trump administration, we had no official U.S. pavilion. So critical nations are coming in and going out of the COP process, and that's extremely unfortunate. But it is encouraging to see that, for example, all the African nations are being sure that they are represented in one way or another. Now, I'd also like to go through the spreadsheet that highlights some of the other pavilions, starting with the regional pavilions. So you can see here that under the regional category, we have Caribbean pavilion, the Sahel drought nations, the vulnerable nations. You heard that raised before, how important it is to do vulnerability assessment. It'll be interesting to see if this pavilion addresses that in a quantitative sense. And then the cities, there's a pavilion just for cities scattered across the globe, joining together. Africa, Europe, Scandinavia, West Africa, and in fact, I think I'm missing one because there's also a Francophone Africa, French-speaking nations. Then within there's a Pacific regional. With the UN, we have the Science Pavilion, that Climate Action Pavilion. We have IFAD on food. We have Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. We have technical innovation, and the World Health Organization has a very busy pavilion with a constant stream of presentations. Now, the spreadsheet that we'll post will allow you to access remotely. For example, the US Pavilion has a YouTube page where they post all of their presentations, so you can absorb the content from the entire US Pavilion, and many of the other pavilions will be doing the same. On the constituency, we have Indigenous, youth, children, labor, and another youth. On technical, they run the full range: forestry, energy, counseling, nuclear, sustainability, lots of energy, oceans, agriculture, water. So quite a few of the technical. On the legal side, eco side, human rights, and Amazonia, then a climate justice pavilion. On the business, on the finance and business, we have various funding agencies and investment groups. And one of the largest is the World Bank, but notably, there's quite a few oil producing nations with some of the most elaborate and covering huge amounts of area within the footprint of COP27. And OPEC even has a pavilion here. So the oil producing nations are well represented, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of dynamic that introduces into the process. So, Rob?
I do have a couple questions, actually. The first one being, can you tell that the oil producing nations have as large of a presence in Egypt as they did in Glasgow? Or have you not been able to tell that yet?
Oh, it's larger. It's
larger.
It's definitely larger.
You can tell.
If you just look at the footprint and the amount of money they've invested in these pavilions, the Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia appears to have, as far as square footage, perhaps the largest pavilion.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's pretty insane, honestly. They keep getting bigger every year, almost like our climate issues. Okay, any other commentary on this from either the YouTube or those in our Zoom call?
One thing I'd like to point out is that There's also an interesting dynamic with Russia. Last year, there was a Central Asian pavilion that included the nations of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. They're not here this year. Tajikistan, however, has a national pavilion, which is unusual because Tajikistan is a very small country, listed as one of the poorest nations on the planet, 7 million people. They, however, have decided to have a pavilion. And I'm curious, if some of the politics involving Russia and Ukraine have spilled over into Central Asia, and perhaps maybe that's contributing to the absence of most of these nations. And then few months ago, there was a Central Asian conference where Putin and Central Asian nations were in attendance. And of course, Russia typically dominates this group. But the Tajik president made a point of giving Putin what I would call an earful and criticizing the conduct of Russia relative to Tajikistan, characterizing it as failing to show sufficient respect for the nation of Tajikistan. So there may be a dynamic there going on that contributes to both the other Central Asian nations not participating and Tajikistan still participating. But regardless, it's unfortunate to see this region of Eurasia expanding where they are not participating in the COP process. It's a critical area to have both Russia and China involved, just as it's essential to have the US involved. And we need to reverse that trend one way or another.
I agree completely, given between the two of them, they do comprise a vast majority of human population, or a vast part of human population. I am glad to see that India is back, though. I know that they made some commitments last year that they were going to reduce their carbon budget to zero by 2070, which still puts us way beyond the line of where we should be searching for. So hopefully maybe this year they will strengthen their NDCs. And instead of hitting that 2070 goal, maybe try to shoot for something a little bit lower. But even though their population is still increasing, at a vast rate. Okay, any other thoughts and concerns on those issues? I think pretty good content so far. If not, we'll move into one of our interviews that we did over at COI, done by our own Esteban. So begin to here. Hopefully shows up for everybody.
We're here today from COI with a group of young climate activists from different university campuses in Taiwan, Singapore, and Japan. Would you like to present yourselves and tell us which country are you from and which campuses are you from?
Hi everyone, I'm from Taiwan. I represent Taiwan Youth Climate Coalition. I'm the deputy head of our COP27 delegation. My name is Ellen, and I'm from National Taipei University in Taiwan.
Don't worry.
Hello everyone, I'm Regina Zhang, and I also come from Taiwan Youth Climate Coalition as the head of COP27 delegation, and I just graduated from National Taiwan University.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Dorcas. I'm from Singapore, representing Singapore Youth for Climate Action, and I'm a climate artist and storyteller, and I'm representing National University of Singapore.
Hi everyone, I'm Yuzu from Japan. I am a member of Climate Youth Japan, and now I'm in the 3rd grade of my bachelor, and I belong to Tokyo University of Foreign Studies.
Hi, my name is Haruki Yamamoto. I'm also a member of Climate Youth Japan. We call it CYJ. I'm a student at Waseda University in Japan.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Hiro. I'm also from Climate Youth Japan from Japan. Now I'm the 1st grade university student of University of Tokyo in Japan. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about the core mission of your organizations within your campuses? We'll start this way again.
Sure. So Taiwan Youth Climate Coalition has long been devoted to climate education and climate youth networking initiatives in universities in Taiwan. For example, we have a special initiative, like we train the club leaders from different universities regarding the sustainability and climate change school clubs. And I think I can pass on to our head.
Sure.
Thank you. So like for the youth networking, we also have some workshops like engage like university students to let them know what is going on our Taiwan's policy agenda. Like we are in 2020 we have an act talking focuses on Greenhouse Gas Management Act, and we are going on the amendment of that. So we train the students to let them know what is happening, and now the act is like in our legislation, like so. We hope that our Taiwan's government can like pass it and to have a more like comprehensive act to address climate change.
Fantastic. And from Singapore.
Yes, for Singapore Climate Action, we're a completely youth-led and volunteer-run organization, and we focus on capacity building workshops for Singaporean youth in order to engage with things like climate policies. So recently we held like 2 climate policy workshops in order to give fellow youths an overview of how the parliamentary process works and how they can engage further with politics and environmental issues in Singapore.
Brilliant. And from Japan?
Before Anthony, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Should we talk about the activities of CYJ or the activities of my university? Which one?
Oh, we'll get to your university eventually. But on
My
the next question,
university.
let's go first for the activities of your
Your
organization.
organization. Okay.
Should I?
Yes, you can.
So we CYJ are not like until now we are not collaborating with some schools or universities, unfortunately, but we do enlighten, I mean, raise awareness of Japanese youth about climate change. And regarding that, we hosted an event, online event, which was called like youth COP preparatory conference, which was online, and the target was from elementary school students to university students.
Fantastic. So then the follow-up question is, within your campuses, have there been particular transitions in terms of lowering down emissions from your campus activities, or other transitions to make campus activities more sustainable that you have advocated for, or your campus by itself has started in the recent years?
Okay,
Sure.
so like I come from National Taiwan University, and in our schools we have some like initiatives like we advocate for the fossil fuel divestment in our campus, and I think it just worked for last year or several years ago. And also our university also commit net zero goal. So I think it's last year's thing. So I think there are some students and student association they are promoting for that. So I think like our university is trying to like transforming to a more greener university in Taiwan.
Wow. Has there been any date associated with the net zero goal thus far?
Actually, I can't remember the year, but they did commit the goal for net zero.
Incredible.
Okay, so our university is National Taipei University, and from 2020 we have been launching the greenhouse gas inventory scheme in our university. And recently we just got carbon neutrality certificate, I think, from Taiwanese government. And we also, our professors have been promoting an initiative that is to establish a carbon negative store in convenience stores.
Remarkable. Singapore.
Um, for the National University of Singapore, we have committed to net zero as well. In fact, I think positive, in fact.
Wow.
So I don't remember what the date is either, either 2025 or 2030. But
That's very ambitious in any case.
it was. I
It
remember
is
that
an
it was
ambitious
quite
goal.
ambitious.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's remarkable.
Yeah. I remember that it was quite ambitious. And in our school as well, we do a lot of research. So we do a lot of research on renewable energies, on electrification of cars. And for our school as well, we are trying to push for NUS to divest from fossil fuels. So recently there was a coalition of students from different universities that we call on all of our universities, not just NUS, and we released a report on, you know, the transitions that the school can take, or like the different policies they can implement in order to help to transition our school out of investing in fossil fuels. This is something that we're continuing to want to advocate for, and I hope that our school is also pushing in that direction as well.
Fantastic.
Okay, so from Japan, my university is Tokyo University of Foreign Studies, and yeah, my university is very positive about carbon neutrality. So the top decided to convert all energy use to 100% renewable ones by 2030.
That is also considered very ambitious.
Very ambitious, I guess. And also, my university joined some kind of university league of renewable energy, which was established in 2019 in Japan. And yeah, like collaborating with other universities, my universities are very working hard to achieving the goal. Yeah, and also we have a kind of student organization for exactly existing for the achievement of carbon neutrality at campus. So also I am a member of the club, and we made kind of saving energy sticker and put the sticker into every classrooms, and so that we can raise awareness of students. So yeah, I think we have a lot of chances to think about climate issues in campus, and also the staff, the professors are very positive about our movement.
Thank you for that. Are there any other actions or any other particular comments that you would like to make for the Campus Climate Corps audience and the U.S. students at large? Dorcas, you're a climate artist.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us about your work?
Okay.
It's difficult without the visual support.
It's okay. So basically, what I try to do in climate art is to tell stories that kind of humanize the climate crisis. So I try not to make it just about facts and figures and numbers, because I feel like people might be quite distanced from things that are very quantifiable. Instead, I try to make things about feelings, or about the real stories that I hear from conferences like this. So things that I do, I guess, are like infographics. So I like to break down social and environmental issues into posters or social media posts, and then I post it on my Instagram account. Another thing I like to do is to do community murals. So this is where I want to involve the entire neighborhood in painting a mural to do with environmental messages. So recently I completed a mural in June about human and nature coexistence. So we got the kids in the neighborhood to come down and to like help paint the different native, the local birds in Singapore, and to also educate them on what it means to live in harmony with nature. And it's really fun because while they're painting also, and like, you know, like splashing paint on the floor as well, they get very excited about talking about environmental and social issues. Yeah, and some other things I do as well is that me and another Singaporean poet, we just released a collection of poetry on different eco emotions, so like eco anxiety or eco grief. And we want to use books like this in order to help start conversations around emotions that we might experience in the climate crisis. So this is just a summary of the work that I do, I guess, as an artist.
Quite an amount of work on top of being a student. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for coming. Any other comments you would like to add?
I just want to add on her like comments is like we also believe that the power of words or visual arts because like in our organization we also has a project called like climate fiction. So we are like designing a future about like what we are going to face when we did nothing for climate change when it comes to 2050. So like maybe we had a like postcards designed and like in the postcard we draw like many famous tourist spots in Taiwan maybe will be underwater if we like did nothing for climate change. So I think that's the power of visual art that maybe beside from like the workshops or like the delivery of knowledge, maybe we can have other ways to also like educate the public about the issue of climate change.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for participating.
Done a wonderful job as always. I think those students were a great example of maybe what the youth is doing around the world and how we're able to showcase that through Campus Climate Corps, the interviews like this. Okay, we're almost hitting the hour note. So is there any last comments anyone would like to make regarding COP27? Any thoughts, ideas, and maybe a message for tuning in tomorrow?
I was pleasantly surprised by these students really and their parallel organizations around their campuses, and essentially their talk became a hub for other organizations just such as ours. One point that Regina wanted to clarify is that her campus committed to carbon neutrality as opposed to net zero, and as if this crisis wasn't difficult enough, there is the difficulties in terminology that is not homogeneous, not always shared, and conventions loosely established, but essentially carbon neutrality sometimes is referred to as a neutrality in terms of CO2, whereas net zero is at times, not always, used to refer to actual net zero emissions of any greenhouse gas, such as nitrous oxide. So it's a more comprehensive objective, and her university is actually committing to carbon neutrality.
Fantastic. John Valhalla, anything to add? All right. In that case, this wraps up Campus Climate Corps, our daily briefing number 2. Stay tuned for tomorrow, daily briefing number 3. I think we're gonna have some excellent content coming your way. Great photos, great pictures. Our folks on the ground are going to be making sure that you have the content you need. Don't forget, as always, you have our emails and anything that you need to reach out to us. Any questions regarding COP, please feel free to reach out. If you would like us to capture anything specific in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, please do feel free to reach out. And until tomorrow, I wish you all a great one. And then from Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, our team says good night as well.